In 1814, Napoleon Bonaparte was finished defeated, humiliated, exiled to a tiny island in the Mediterranean. Kings across Europe breathed a collective sigh of relief, uncorking champagne to celebrate the end of a nightmare. They believed the age of Napoleon was over. They were wrong. Less than 1 year later, the same man would march into Paris, take back the French throne without firing a single shot, and shake the entire continent to its core all over again. This is the incredible true story of how Napoleon rose from exile to rule Europe not once, but twice. To understand how he did it, you first have to understand who he was. Napoleon was not born into royalty. He was a Corsican outsider, a kid with an accent, looked down upon by the French elite. But from a young age, he had a genius for one thing: war. While others saw soldiers, he saw chess pieces. While they followed old rules, he wrote new ones. Speed, discipline, and a deep understanding of human psychology were his weapons. By his early 30s, Napoleon had crushed the most powerful armies in Europe across Italy, Egypt, and Austria. His victories were so stunning, so decisive, that they seemed almost supernatural. In 1804, he didn't wait for someone to give him power, he took it, crowning himself Emperor of France. For the next decade, Europe either bent to his will or burned. Kings feared him. Rival generals copied his tactics. Napoleon wasn't just winning battles, he was redrawing the map of Europe and rewriting the laws of a continent. He seemed invincible, until he made one fatal mistake. In 1812, Napoleon marched his grand army, over 500,000 strong, into the vast, frozen expanse of Russia. It was the beginning of the end. The Russian strategy was brutal and effective. They refused to fight a decisive battle. Instead, they retreated, burning their own cities and fields, leaving nothing for the invaders. Then winter arrived. Not just a cold spell, but the legendary Russian winter. It became Napoleon's true enemy. Cold, starvation, and disease ripped through the Grand Army. The retreat turned into a death march. Of the more than 600,000 soldiers who marched into Russia, only a tiny, frostbitten fraction staggered back out. For the first time, Europe saw blood in the water. The invincible emperor suddenly looked very human, very beatable. His enemies, emboldened by his catastrophic failure, united against him. By 1814, allied armies marched into Paris itself. Napoleon, cornered and abandoned by his own marshals, was forced to abdicate. His punishment: exile. He was sent to Elba, a small, pleasant island off the coast of Italy. The great powers of Europe were lenient. They let him keep his title of emperor, a small personal guard of a few hundred loyal veterans, and most dangerously of all, his pride. They thought sending him to an island was enough. They thought the story was over. They had just written the opening scene of his greatest comeback. While Napoleon was on Elba, the France he had built began to fall apart. The old monarchy was restored, but the new king, Louis XVIII, was clumsy and out of touch. Promises made to the nation were broken. The soldiers of the Grand Army, who had conquered Europe for France, were neglected, their pensions cut, their honor insulted. From his island perch, Napoleon watched and listened. He received a stream of visitors, read newspapers, and analyzed the political climate. He understood something the kings of Europe had forgotten. Power doesn't just disappear, that it waits. And his power wasn't in a palace or a crown. It was in the hearts of his soldiers and the memory of the French people. He still had their loyalty. He still had their love. All he needed was the right moment to ignite it. That moment came in February 1815. In an act of breathtaking audacity, Napoleon escaped Elba. There was no massive fleet, no secret army waiting for him. There was a masterpiece of courage and calculation. He slipped past his British guards and landed on the southern coast of France with just 1,000 men. His goal: march to Paris and reclaim his empire. The king, now panicking in Paris, sent an army to intercept and arrest him. Near Grenoble, Napoleon's small force came face to face with a royalist regiment. His men raised their muskets. The king's soldiers aimed theirs. A single shot could have ended it all. Instead, Napoleon walked forward, alone, until he was within earshot. He opened his famous gray coat and addressed the soldiers who had once fought for him. "Soldiers of the 5th Regiment," he shouted, "if there is a man among you who wishes to kill his emperor, here I am." For a moment, there was silence. Then a cry went up from the royalist ranks, "Vive l'Empereur!" "Long live the emperor!" The soldiers threw down their weapons, not to surrender, but to join him. They didn't shoot. They followed. That single, electrifying moment changed history. Every army sent to stop him switched sides. His march to Paris became a triumphant parade. On March 20th, 1815, Napoleon entered Paris to the thunderous cheers of massive crowds. The king had fled just hours before. Without firing a single shot in battle, Napoleon had reconquered France. This period, known as the 100 Days, saw him ruling as emperor once more. But Europe was in a state of sheer panic. His old enemies Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia immediately declared war, not on France, but on Napoleon himself. They had learned their lesson. This time, they would not make the same mistake. This time, they would unite to crush him for good. The final showdown came in June 1815. On a muddy field in modern-day Belgium called Waterloo, it was Napoleon's last great gamble. He hoped to defeat the British and Prussian armies before they could fully unite. The battle was a brutal, chaotic slugging match. A sudden downpour turned the ground to mud, slowing down his devastating artillery and cavalry charges. Key orders were misunderstood, and crucially, Prussian reinforcements arrived at the perfect moment for his enemies. And the worst possible moment for him, for one of the few times in his career. Napoleon was decisively outmaneuvered. His legendary Imperial Guard made one last, heroic stand, but it was hopeless. The defeat was total and final. This time, there would be no mercy. There would be no comfortable island exile. Napoleon was sent to St. Helena, a desolate, windswept rock in the middle of the South Atlantic, thousands of miles from anywhere. It was the most remote place his captors could find. There would be no second escape. He spent his final years dictating his memoirs, building his own legend, before dying in 1821. But his influence didn't die with him. Napoleon's story proves something timeless. True leadership isn't about titles or crowns. It's about loyalty, belief, and momentum. Even in exile, a man with the devotion of his people was more powerful than kings sitting on their thrones. He fell, ultimately, because of his limitless ambition. But he rose, against all odds, because millions of people believed in the idea he represented, an idea of glory, of strength, and of a nation defined not by birth, but by greatness. And that belief was powerful enough to change the world. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more incredible moments from history.